everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this week's video, we're jumping back on the Storage Unit 60 series I found several years ago. And we're gonna be pulling it out of storage as if it's a barn find, because every time we seem to pull it out of the storage, it becomes a barn find, if you know what I mean. And we're not gonna be putting any more money into car covers because it clearly just doesn't need any more at this point. We actually might be putting a drivetrain in there. We've been working and talking about that for a couple of years now, you know. But first we gotta get it out of this barn and into the space that we're going to be putting the drivetrain in by ourselves in the rain, mud, and cold. Man, that was a heck of a battle to get this thing in here, but she's inside now and unwrapped. I forget how beautifully painted this thing is sometimes, but that's not what we're here to talk about. It is this beautiful gem that's sitting in front of me, which is a Chevy 350 V8. This was a Chevy 350 that was found in the back barn that was all locked up and ready for the junkyard. So I pulled it out, cleaned her all up, had her all remachined 40 over, put aluminum heads on it, and a roller cam. Now she is ready to get slapped into this old Landcruiser and go down the road for the first time in many, many years, which I am so excited about. I've been waiting to do this for a very long time. This is gonna be one of those swaps that I've never done before because I usually only work on Toyota stuff. So going to this Chevy platform is gonna be a little different for me. So if there's stuff that you're seeing in the video that maybe I'm doing wrong or I could be doing better, please leave a comment below because this is a whole new platform for me. So let's get started. Let's get this cleaned up a little bit. Fenders off, hood off, give us enough room to get this big V8 in there. Well, that's a little better with the fender and hood off, a little more work room never hurt anybody. I mean, they weren't really bolted on anyways, they were just there stationary for storage all those years. Now we're gonna be talking about the motor mounts themselves. I bought this truck as a rolling project from somebody else that was gonna LS swap it. So with that said, I got these mounts, which are the LS mounts for an FJ60 with the truck. Obviously that's not gonna work for the Chevy 350. So I did a little research and I found these mounts. Unfortunately with these mounts, one side, the driver's side, was a little long and was running into the power steering box and wasn't going to work, would have had to cut those down. Then lucky enough, I found a set of other V8 brackets for a Chevy into Toyota on eBay. As you can see, one is shorter than the other, which will work for the driver's side. So we're gonna go ahead and go with these. I don't know what brand these are, but I know they're gonna work because they're very similar to the LS ones that came with the truck originally. So let's get these slapped onto the block and see if we can get this motor dropped in. Well, really great news, the engine's in the truck. But really bad news, don't buy somebody else's project. Because the motor mounts are completely welded in the wrong spot. Again, I mentioned that this was going to be an LS swap. As you can see here, these are my engine mounts that mount to the block. This is the hard mount to the frame for the engine. That's like a mile off. Everything else is bolted up in the back here onto the bell housing and transmission. That all looks good. The motor probably is in the right space, but unfortunately, we need to find somebody that can weld those mounts on for me. So I think we got to pull the engine out, get it all mocked back up, and get the right frame mounts in there. small little deviation, detour in the project, we're back. We had to cut those LS mounts out and get small block 350 mounts welded in, which I was really excited to be part of that process because I'd never welded mounts into a vehicle before, so it was really cool to see what goes into doing something like that. And before you get upset saying, Jonas, why would you cut out LS mounts? I just want everybody to know they do make LS mounts that go from 350 to LS should I want to swap to an LS motor down the road. But this project, I really wanted to keep it simple, and that's why we are going with an old school Chevy 350. Moving forward, we're waiting for a ton of parts for the front end here, the V-belts, alternator, power steering, water pump type of stuff. So that's all in the mail, and once it gets here, we'll jump on over there. One thing we were able to tackle was the slave cylinder, clutch fork, and clutch assembly over here on the driver's side, which I'm gonna zoom in and take you through that because it was a little bit of research to get it all right and get the right parts in there so it is working correctly. So that's what we're gonna dive into right now.
As you can see, we're running a factory Toyota slave cylinder for an old Landcruiser, which is really great. They make this bracket here online with a little bit of spacer. It bolts right up to the Chevy bell housing. So that was really exciting that we were able to use that. It gets a little confusing back here when we start mixing Chevy and Toyota parts. So here we are running a Chevy early clutch fork. And as you can see, it is totally different than the newer style Chevy fork, which I originally had in the bell housing back there, but it was hitting the housing on the bell housing here and it was not releasing the bearing correctly. So we had to go with the straighter fork there. As you can see here, this rod coming out of the slave is from an earlier FJ60 55, and it allows you to adjust the fork the way you need to adjust it, as well as this spring that holds the fork back comes to this bracket here. This bracket came off an early FJ60 FJ40 2F, which allows you to have that spring there. Moving forward to the actual hard line, it was bolted up using a homemade bracket that we made here, as usually would not be bolted on the driver's side, it would be on the passenger side. So that looks really great. It's all looks super factory and put together. Again, this is the first time that I've ever done this type of thing on one of these Chevys to Toyota. It's a learning process for me. There's things that you're seeing that you're maybe confused by, or maybe that I could do better. Please leave a comment below so I can try to fix those things moving forward on this project.
We finally got our first box of key items in the mail today. Some things like the water pump, the carburetor gasket, the thermostat housing and thermostat. These are items that are going to be key to starting dressing this motor up. The belt kit, starter, and things like that are still on their way. Start here and slap those things on until the other stuff gets here. Heater hoses here, and our brand new Chevy starter. Well, the belt and pulley system for the 350 just showed up, which is huge because it means we're one step closer to firing this thing off. And we got the power steering pump, which we're going to be putting on today as well. So we have to figure out how to do all that.
Well, as you can see, it was pretty painless to get that pulley kit and accessories all bolted onto the 350. We went to AutoZone and got our belts. Our power steering belt fit, but our alternator belt didn't, so we'll have to go and get a fresh one of those. Moving forward, we have a few more things we need to do before we can start the truck. Things like wiring. We need to adapt the Toyota wiring harness to the 350, which shouldn't be too hard. We need to get all of our heater lines from our water pump to our Toyota heater core all bolted down. We do have the lines already. We need to get our radiator in here and our lines all situated for that. I did go ahead and test fit the OEM Toyota radiator, and it does fit and clear the fan that we have bolted on here. We are still waiting for some small things to finish off the 350 side of things like the power steering line from the Toyota box to the Saginaw pump here. We also are waiting for some heat shields to get our plug wires all situated the correct way for one of these older 350s. So that's the list of things we need to do. Let's jump on it. A couple areas to note on wiring the 350. One, our alternator, which as you see, we have a pigtail already ordered from the parts store and ready to be wired up for that, as well as the one wire on the back of the alternator here. We have to wire up our starter, which is the one wire that comes off the harness, which shouldn't be too bad. We went ahead and made a little pigtail for that. Moving up to the top of the motor, we have a wire running to our electric choke on our carburetor, over to our HEI distributor, which is a 1-wire distributor, as well as our tack line. We have 2 wires running off this, as well as our OEM Toyota oil sending unit there. So if you see here, we have a mocked up wiring harness running across the firewall here. It's just all put in place just to make sure we get the wires all cut to size. And we've gone ahead and took a junk wiring harness from an OEM Toyota FJ60 and cut all the connectors out to give it a little bit of a seamless look. Once we get all those lines pulled out, we're gonna take them home and get them all soldered up and rig the harness look extremely nice so it looks like it's OEM to the truck. We can finally put the plug wires on 350. We had to wait for our Corvette parts from Corvette Central. These are heat shields that get mounted right here on the ram horns, which these are re-popped ram horn exhaust manifolds. And when you have these, you need to run your plug wires in a specific way. They go down and to the back of the motor where the distributor is. If I were running headers on this motor, they would, from what I understand, go to the top of the motor to avoid the spark plug wires getting burned from the exhaust heat. So super excited to get these slapped on and get those plug wires on the motor. We got the spark plugs all routed correctly, and we have those heat shields holding them in place below the manifolds, as you can see in the video. Next, we got to get the carburetor on there, get the fuel line all hooked up, and then we're going to run to the parts store and see if we can get some radiator hoses to run to the OEM Toyota radiator. It shouldn't be too bad. They have a whole wall of hoses. And the final piece of the puzzle is finally here to get this 350 finally installed into the 60 series. And that is the JT Outfitters hard power steering line, which adapts the GM power steering pump to the Toyota steering box. Once that is all installed, we're gonna go ahead and get fluids in there, kind of work through the sketchy wiring that needs a ton more work, but we're gonna rig it up so maybe we can crank on a little bit. Off camera, we went ahead and installed some external gauges so we know what's going on during the first start. Those are here. We wanna make sure that we have oil pressure. We don't need this motor blowing up on us and keeping this thing in the barn any longer. So that's where we're at right now. We're gonna get this power steering line all hooked up and get those wires kind of at a better location, and maybe we'll crank this thing over for the first time. I got everything slightly ghetto rigged here. Got our little fuel system here as the fuel tank isn't all connected just yet. Got some battery cables here, which aren't the final battery cables we're gonna be using, and we still need to wrap up all of this wiring. But as for the most part, we do have everything connected the way I want it. Still need to go through and get the alternator connected, but for now, this one wire that runs to the alternator will work just fine. Well, all systems go here. This is a enormous moment for me. This truck has been on the back burner forever, and I've been trying to build it for what seems like since the beginning of time. I'm ready to turn the key for the first time, and I am crossing my fingers she's going to turn over and do something for us, at least bark off something. She doesn't have an exhaust. I'm sure she's going to be really loud. So let's turn the key together and see what happens. Fire it off, everyone. Leaking power steering fluid everywhere. But she runs, everyone. Crisis averted. We had to tighten up our power steering line a little bit, and we're good to go for another crank over here.
going into the truck. You might be wondering, Jonas, is the gas tank hooked up? Well, at a time long ago, I hooked it up and got it all ready for this day. With putting gas in the truck, it might mean that she might move today. We already know that she runs and sounds pretty good. And still has a long way to go, but I need some encouragement, and seeing this old girl move would be incredible. We did a couple things off camera, which will go to the front of the truck, and I'll show you what those things were in a minute.
A couple things we did off camera was put some new battery cable ends on. I'm gonna be ordering some new battery cables, but this is gonna work for our purposes right now. We went ahead, like I said, plumbed the gas tank all the way up here with a fuel filter so our lines are running. You might look a little distracted by this fresh 1985 FJ60 wiring harness. I got fed up with the one that came with the truck, tracking down all these gremlins, and I decided to just switch that out, which involved ripping the entire interior out again to get that in there. Moving over here to the carburetor linkage side, we got all the linkage all together for the carburetor and accelerator pedal. All of these brackets are all 60 series that I had in a box, and I just dug through. I think these came from AC lines, and this one is from inside AC box. I'm not really sure where this one is, but I'm 100% sure it is 60 series, but it's working for our purposes right now. We'll be taking that stuff off later to get it all painted up and pretty, or maybe make something a little bit more streamlined. We went ahead and used the universal AutoZone throttle cable kit here, which is this silver guy here. We cut it down and ran it to the pedal. The 62 series already were cables originally, so it makes it really easy to hook up a cable linkage like this.
She didn't move far, but she did move. That is a enormous victory. It's been a long time in the making. Can't wait to take this thing down the road. That's gonna be the conclusion of this episode. If you liked it, feel free to subscribe, like, and share these videos. As you can see, this truck needs a ton more work, and I'm gonna bring it to you on the channel in the months to come. It's a huge step forward that she took her first ride around the cul-de-sac and is back in the barn, but I'm looking forward to really getting this truck to where she really deserves to be. Cheers, and we'll see you on the next episode.